So, should you enter your business into the Queen's Award for Enterprise? How do you enter your business into the Queen's Award for Enterprise? And most importantly, how do you increase and maximise your chances of winning a Queen's Award for Enterprise? Those are the three questions we're going to hopefully answer for you today as succinctly and yet comprehensively as possible. And to help me answer those questions, I have Deputy Lieutenant Tim Cobb of East Sussex Lord Lieutenancy. And we have Lindsay here, who is the CEO and founder of Customer Thermometer. That is a one-click customer surveying tool that's selling very successfully around the world. And the business is a 2019 Queen's Award for Enterprise winner. So she's going to be sharing with you all her experiences of the process and the benefits at the end, and hopefully answer the question about should you enter or not. Okay, and so finally, the third person speaking is myself. My name is Chris Robinson. I'm the founder and managing director of a company called Boost Awards. I founded the business in 2006. We're as the world's first and now the largest award entry consultancy. We have a subsidiary called Boost Evaluation, but it's a number crunching and analytics company that goes hand in hand with entering awards. And I'm personally a co-founder of the Independent Awards Standards Council, and we monitor and monitor the awards industry, and we are looking after the awards trust mark that you are increasingly seeing when you apply for awards. You will see this logo out there with the gold tick on it. And also Boost Awards looks after the awards list website, which is the most popular awards database in the world. Within that database, there are 3,500 awards, approaching 4,000 now. And of those 3,500 awards, one award stands out, head and shoulders above all the others. And we refer to it as the mother of all awards, and that is the Queen's Award for Enterprise. And that is why we are dedicating a whole workshop just to one award out of the 3,500 in our database. And to help explain the heritage, the history, the provenance of a scheme, and why it's associated with the Lord Lieutenancy, I'm going to hand over to Tim Cobb here, Deputy Lieutenant, and who will explain that to you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Cobb, and I'm a Deputy Lieutenant of East Sussex. The first thing I'm going to do is a quick bit of audience participation. Does anyone have the slightest clue what the East Sussex Lieutenancy does? I'm assuming no one does, so you will not disappoint me. Okay, for the benefit of the camera, lots of shaking heads. Chris has very kindly said I can take 1 minute just to tell a little bit about the history of the Lieutenancy, which hopefully will be of interest, and then I'll get on to the subject that you're here for. So, 16th century, noblemen and sheriffs were becoming ungovernable. They had large egos and were acting like kings in their own regions. King Henry VIII wanted to curtail their excesses but did not have an appetite for a fight. So in 1540 he got them all together, asked them to be his personal representatives in the area. They were to be his lieu in place of tenant, the land occupier. So they were offered status, authority, and would act as his personal representatives. They would be responsible for law and order and all military measures needed in local defence. So the noblemen and sheriffs liked what they heard and agreed to become Lord's Lieutenant, one in each county. 30 years later, the King introduced deputy lieutenants to support the work of the Lord Lieutenant. And I was made a deputy in East Sussex, Brighton and Hove in 2017. The key task of the lieutenancy are to uphold the dignity of the Crown and seek to support the welfare of the community. The East Sussex Lieutenancy focuses itself on three key areas, which are royal duties. So if there's a royal visit in the area, somebody from the lieutenancy would be there to support and to help organise. County duties and community support. So today, I'm just going to talk briefly about the royal duties and in particular the Queen's Award for Enterprise and for Business, which is obviously why you're all here. The Lord Lieutenant Peter Field, who I'm representing today, is a huge fan of the Queen's Award for Enterprises. He's very, very keen for as many businesses as possible that meet the criteria to actually enter and to have a go. So he doesn't get involved in the judging or the recommendation side. That is done by a business panel at a national level. He will present the awards, should you be successful, on behalf of the Queen. Okay, so there we go. So far, so good. So a little bit about the Queen's Awards for Export. They came into life in 1966 under the name of the Queen's Awards for Export, very specific. They've been reviewed and fine-tuned over the intervening decades to ensure that they continue not only to be relevant, but one of the most sought-after awards in the UK with global recognition. And I really support what Chris was saying about how this is the mother of all awards. And we were joking beforehand that if you were successful in winning one of these, all of your other awards, Brighton Business Person of the Year, etc., Brighton Person, Women of the Year, will go out the window, and that would probably become your key award and key focal point. This year there were 201 awards given out. The international trade category saw by far the most Queen's Award winners. There are 129 of those, covering a wide and varied range of industries, including customer Thermometer, who you'll be hearing from later this morning. The Queen's Award Innovation category this year had the second largest number of winners at 61. The Sustainable Development had 5 winners, and Promoting Opportunity had 6. So this year there are only 3 categories that have been launched so far. The final one, Sustainable Development category, is being fine-tuned, it's having an overhaul, but the closing date will still be the same date for this category. The organiser suggests that you allow at least 50 hours to complete each entry, so there is some work involved in doing it and doing it properly. The shortlisted companies are informed via email in late October, early November, but they are not allowed to make a public announcement of this. So that must be one of the toughest secrets to actually keep, the fact that you have been shortlisted, but you're not allowed to tell anybody. The waiting comes to an end in April when the winners are announced. Okay, the Queen's Award for Enterprise is the most credible UK award out there, bar none. The award comes with a host of benefits, such as being able to fly the logo as a flag above your office, if you're able to, for 5 years, and to use the emblem on all of your marketing materials. You get a site visit from Royal Representative to present the award, if you so desire. It's your choice. You get an invite for the leader and a frontline staff member, perhaps someone who's been key to the growth of the business or in fact has helped you put the award together, to a royal reception at Buckingham Palace. And you're given a grant of appointment and a commemorative crystal bowl. So unlike the majority of other awards, which you probably... Can I just check, has everyone entered various awards over the years? Yeah? Okay. So unlike a lot of them, there is no entry fee or ceremony fees associated with this particular award. The Lord Lieutenant encourages every business that fits the bill to try and win the award. From me, a little bit about Boost Awards. In my business capacity, so I have another life outside of the lieutenancy, which is I run a PR and digital marketing company. I've got offices in Eastbourne and over in Brighton. So I have known Chris in a professional capacity for some years now. I dread to think how many actually, Chris? 7 or 8. And I have used Chris to support me with some of the awards that my company has entered, and I'm pleased to recommend his services. However, the Lord Lieutenant has asked me to make clear that you do not have to use an awards company to enter. You can do it yourself. So my apologies, Chris, for having to say that, but I did warn him I would be saying that. So that's everything from me for the minute. Thank you for your attention.
Main question that you might be asking yourselves, who here thinks that they are definitely entering the Queen's Award? So we've got some, possibly, maybe. Well, the most important question is, should we? Can we? Are we eligible? I hope hearing Tim explain the provenance and the value and the benefits of entering makes you want to, but could you win? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you through 4 different scenarios. There are 4 awards, and each one is very specific about the sort of company that it's designed to recognise. So I'm going to explain what each of these scenarios is, and hopefully you're going to hear one of them, and it could be that you hear for more than one, and decide that's us. That description fits our business, let's go for it. And it's important to note that you can go for all 4. And last year, I think there was 69, or there was a number of companies that actually were multiple winners. So it is absolutely allowed. So let's start with the innovation one. This one, although it's not the biggest in terms of numbers, it's the most catch-all one, and often the first place that people start. Now, in the past, it was very much aimed at the physical innovation. So you would invent a product. And so it could be for you designed a new catalyst for reducing emissions, or that you had a new vacuum cleaner. That has changed, and we've been lobbying and working with the Queen's Award for a number of years, and although they very much said it is for service innovation, only in the last 2 years have we noticed that service innovations are very much on an equal footing to physical invention. So last year, in fact, we did an analysis, and it was more service innovations that won than actual physical innovations, which is great news, and that opens it up to vast swathes of British enterprise, which is absolutely right. Okay, with a lot of these categories, you have to make a decision in terms of time frame. The minimum here is that you submit 2 years of financials for your business and for the stated innovation. So if the innovation is how you run your business, and it's not something that has a profit and loss, you will struggle to fill in that part of the application form. So it is very much designed for a commercial innovation, so that you have a product, a service, or something equivalent that you can take to market and measure the sales. Because a key criteria for being recognised is that you have to demonstrate payback. Whatever was your research and development investment, you need to demonstrate that it has been recovered in full. And we've seen a lot of fantastic innovations, and you can talk to the Queen's Award Office, the earlier in the year the better, and they will be very honest with you, and I've heard them being very honest and saying, it's too soon. You haven't achieved payback. That is a binary, not yet decision. So that's absolutely vital. One thing that's less binary and is a lot more open to interpretation is where you say outstanding commercial success. The definition of outstanding is up to you to demonstrate. And this is where it's not just enough to present your numbers. You have to use the narrative and the text boxes to help the judges of these awards, who are going to take a long time, a lot more time than your average awards judge, in making a decision. So you can explain to them, but in the context of our industry, this is outstanding, or compared to our other products, this is outstanding. Because they don't want just any old innovations going for this award. They have to demonstrate that they've been outstanding. And so you need to show 2 years worth of company figures, but it needs to have been launched for at least 2 years. So you can present graphs for that product and go back as long as you want, but they need at least 2 years of commercial success. Okay, so that, and it could be that your entire business is the innovation, and that's absolutely applicable as well, and you can fill in the form to that way, but the form lends itself to a specific innovation within a wider business. And for that reason, you are actually allowed to enter multiple innovations in a given year, and you can win more than one Queen's Award for Enterprise Innovation in a given year, and that's absolutely fine. Other categories, you can only enter one entry into them. Let's look at the next category. This again is for a story within a wider business. This is the social mobility category. And they position it as for programs. It could be described as your strategy, but this is for companies that reach out into the community and take people from disadvantaged backgrounds, whether it's for disability or income, or they go to the inner city, something which takes people who would otherwise struggle to get a good career and give them a shove in the career and give them social mobility. And they've got examples here of the sort of programs that they're looking for: work experience, careers advice, mentoring, and non-graduate routes, all of these things. So it could be just a project, a program within a wider business, and that's perfectly applicable. Some of these categories apply much more for the business as a whole, but this one is looking at a specific program. And you should only enter one category for your one entry for your business. Last year, this was the one that received the least awards. I believe it was 5. So it's one that's, they're looking for more applications. So I would look hard at your business and see if you have got a program like this, and they're looking for more applications for this. Okay. This is one of the tricky ones. There are loads of awards out there for corporate social responsibility: community work, environmental work, marketplace, and customer base. Things that you do that is responsible. This award is looking for a company that is primarily environmentally focused, but they haven't published the criteria for this year, and they won't be until July. So we don't know precisely, but what they are doing is a big overhaul this year to align the awards to the UN goals. And the UN has these 17 goals that are things like eradicating poverty, making sure everyone has zero hunger, is their phrasing. So they've got all these goals, and they want to see that your business as a whole is aligning itself to these UN 17 goals. Okay, and so we're yet to see how that translates into an entry form. That sounds like it could be a big old entry form. But in previous years, what they've wanted is for you to explain everything you do for community, environment, workplace, and marketplace, but with a focus on environment. So we've seen companies that are really great in the community not be recognised because there is a bias towards the environment there. But it's a watch this space. Same deadline as Tim mentioned. It's still the same September deadline, but you're not going to have much of a run at it. Fourth, this is the most popular category. It's the one with the most wins. It's a much more clear-cut category. This is for your business as a whole. You can only enter one application per year into this award. You can then reapply. Ideally, when your award is about to expire, you get 5 years for all of these awards, and you have to wait until the final year of that 5 to reapply. But you are allowed to have a go. If you've had an amazing 2 years, then you can apply after a 2-year period. But you're only allowed to enter your business as a whole, because this is recognising your business and its international trade. Your burden of proof here is that you are leading your industry. You can define industry as you wish. So it could be pharmaceutical, it could be the exporting of market research. The customer Thermometer defined its industry in its own way. It could be market research, it could be customer surveying. But you have to make the judges believe that when it comes to international trade, you are ahead of the competition. So this is where some of the evidencing techniques we'll talk about later will come in. Okay, and so you have 2 options here, but we'll mention again later. You can show 3 years of financials or 6 years of financials. And by financials, we're talking about trading internationally and your overall company financials. You have to show that you have achieved growth in that period of time. That is mandatory. The fact that you are trading successfully internationally isn't enough. It has to either have 2 years versus a baseline of 3 years back of outstanding growth, defined, which you have to help the judges appreciate, or 5 years versus a 6-year ago baseline of strong, steady growth. And we find, just through our experience, that the 6-year application of 5 years of steady growth versus a 6-year ago baseline tends to be the most successful approach. So what does a international trade winner look like? Well, we have today a winner of a 2019 international trade. We have Lindsay Willott, and she is going to tell you her story of her journey and the benefits, and hopefully you'll listen to her story and feel, I want some of that, and learn from her experiences too.
Morning everybody. So I'm Lindsay Willott. I am the founder and CEO of Customer Thermometer. A little bit of background on what we do. So as you can see here, we create one-click customer feedback software. The journey started about 8 years ago when I used to run a marketing agency, and I wanted to get quicker feedback from my customers in a way that wouldn't bother them. So doing away with long surveys, trying to find a way that would engage customers more effectively in real time. And Customer Thermometer was born. It is, as I say, about 8 years old, and we've got 8 people at the moment, 4 of whom are based here in Brighton and 4 of whom work from home. And we were delighted to win the Queen's Award for Enterprise this year for international trade. I was actually standing here in Platform 9 when I got the news that we'd won, and it was a genuinely an amazing and emotional moment for me. Being the CEO of an early stage company, particularly when you're on your own working from a tiny office at home, can be quite thankless, quite lonely, quite grindy. And so to have something of this quality, to have something that recognises the business and the achievements of everybody in it at this international scale has been phenomenal, and a genuinely emotional and lovely thing to win. So I've been invited here today to talk a little bit about why we decided to go for the Queen's Award, to talk a bit about what it was like to work with Boost, what it was like to go through the application process, and then to sort of have a chat about the benefits. And any questions you've got at the end, I'd be delighted to answer them if I can help. So about 4 years ago, I was invited to a dinner in Oxford, a business dinner, and I got sitting next to this man called Dominic. And he ran this big manufacturing company called Dura. And they make amazing installations for Ferrari, Porsche, Aston Martin. They put garages in all over the place for those guys globally. They have a big manufacturing facility. And he also builds the sort of secret man caves where some of the privately wealthy individuals of the world keep all their hot metal, and he sort of fits all of those out. And there was a kind of sparkle around the room because Dominic's company had just won the Queen's Award for Enterprise for International Trade. And everyone was like, wow, that guy's just won that award. And it was really quite, I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. So I got chatting to him. He told me all about the business. In all honesty, it felt way out of my league at the time. We were very small, there were maybe 3 of us. But it was just one of those things, you know how life does it to you sometimes, where the next day I was driving down the motorway and I saw the E on the back of a DPD truck. And then I was going into a shop somewhere and there was an E on the door, and I just started to see it everywhere. And I thought, I think the world's telling me something and I really want one of those. But we were clearly too small at that point in time. So fast forward to last year, and I think Boost had sent me the email that I'm sure some of you have received, which is their sort of update on all the awards that are available to win in the coming quarter. And the Queen's Award was on there as a kind of future event. So I got in touch with them, and they were absolutely brilliant. They didn't just sort of say, yes, absolutely, we'll do that application for you, off you go. They talked me through what was involved. They explained that it would be at least 50 hours on their part and probably as much again on ours to pull the data together. And they talked through where we were up to with our numbers so that we could really understand whether we would fit the criteria or not. And after a couple of conversations, it was clear that we probably had at least a fair shot, so we thought we'd give it a go. We have applied for a number of awards over the last 6 to 12 months. I would definitely underline that this is quite a biggie. It's certainly in terms of the quality of information and the type of information that you need to provide. It's not massively onerous, particularly if you have Boost on your side, but it is bigger than the average bear, so definitely worth bearing that in mind. The process itself was really straightforward. I think the thing I would underline more than anything about it is this is so easy to put in the pile of something that is important but not urgent. So every week you think, right, I'll get around to that Queen's Award thing, and then the week goes by and you haven't done it. And then again and again and again. And all of a sudden, you're 3 weeks out and you haven't applied, and you just look at the application and think, I can't possibly do that in the time left to do it. And you know, one thing I can say for sure is you definitely won't win it if you don't apply. You're not in with a chance. So I think having Boost there to control the sort of cadence of our award entry and to ask us for information as time went on was really important. The other really big thing that I think they brought to it, and Becky, our project manager, was amazing at this, was to help us understand what some of the more opaque questions actually meant. So if I'd looked at the application form cold, I would have thought we didn't have a chance, because at the point in time we applied for it, we were a remote operation. Everybody worked from home. We didn't even have the base that we've got here in Brighton now. And I just assumed that that counted us out because we didn't have a real office for the Lord Lieutenant to turn up at with the bowl. So that is something that they said, no, actually, it's fine. It doesn't matter that you're remote. This is how we'll describe it. This is how it works. There was a big part, even though we've won for export, there was a big part about culture and about team building and about training. There was quite a lot about what we did environmentally. You need to show the full 360 that you're a good business, not just the export piece. So again, because we didn't have a proper office, I was concerned we wouldn't be able to demonstrate what we did on carbon reduction, for example. But we were able to look at the fact, because we build software as a service, we were able to demonstrate that we don't fly all over the world to give demos, we do them online. And we were able to show the reduction in our carbon footprint that came out of the back of that. So having Boost there to kind of question us about what we actually did was fascinating, because I think there was a lot that we were already doing within the business that we didn't necessarily appreciate that we were doing. They were able to help sort of tease that out. So in terms of what the benefits have been for the business, I'd say the first one, and the one that's dearest to my heart, is we are a very close-knit team, and in many ways this has made us even closer. Every single one of the team at Customer Thermometer works incredibly hard to provide a great service, to really go above and beyond, and it's been recognised by the Queen and the government in an award of this calibre. Rightly so, in my opinion, but it makes a huge difference to all of us to actually have that logo on our email and on our headed paper that just goes to show, in competitive situations, up against lots of American companies, the Queen's logo, the Queen's Award, carries a huge amount of weight. We call our customer support team the Ministry of Magic because they're really good at what they do. So having that Harry Potter element combined with a little logo from the Queen is no bad thing to help our exports go even further. The other thing that isn't necessarily as obvious as you might think, but it's been massive, is purchase reinforcement. So we've got some really big customers like Dollar Shave Club, Unilever, Glossier, BT Global Services who buy from us. And we're a small company, and in doing so, they put a great deal of faith into us and into what we do, and they choose us over some pretty heavyweight competitors. So for them to be able to turn around and say, that thing I bought last week, look, they've just won a Queen's Award for Enterprise, it makes them feel good. It makes them feel that their purchase is justified. So that's been a massive thing. We've had a lot of really lovely feedback from customers, lots of commentary on social media, people here popping in to say congratulations. The goodwill and the sense of, as I say, purchase reinforcement's been excellent. What else? So we are recruiting at the moment. The ability to add this into our job application forms and our adverts and our online bits and pieces has just really helped with us attracting candidates. That's been really, really important. We've also had, you've seen a bit of it already, but we've only had the award for a month, and you keep it for 5 years. So we've still got quite a lot of benefits still to come. But this was just a handful of the bits and pieces of the PR that we got in the first week, and it's still rolling through now. And it's also helping us get more coverage because we have something, really newsworthy to say. We're not just a UK fast-growing startup company, but we're one that's just won the Queen's Award for Enterprise. So that gives us quite a lot of gravitas to generate more marketing, and at our size, that's really important and really, really good. We are in no way looking to sell the business, but it absolutely is a premium factor on anybody's valuation. If you were to take your business out and want to take it to market in the future, this is a premium factor without a doubt. Evidenced not least by the fact that for the first time in our history, our bank manager contacted us the week after we won it and invited us out for lunch. It's definitely a premium factor on the business, and one that's not to be taken lightly. It is a cut above the other awards from that perspective. So in all seriousness, though, I think the biggest point I'd make is not just winning it, but actually the process of applying for this award. It makes you think about your business in a whole different way. So like anybody, we were looking at how well we were doing by profit and loss, our monthly recurring revenue, the number of customers we were adding. We had a very set way of how we looked at business success. when we got the application form through and we started to look at the questionnaire, I still remember Jim and I going to London, he's our managing director, to look through all of our export statistics because we didn't have them, you know, so we were like sitting there going, right, well, we need to say how many countries we export to. Now we knew we exported to a lot, and we knew that a lot of our business came from the US, but when we sat down and looked at it, we exported to 63 countries, 63. We'd increased our export turnover by 300%. And I genuinely had no idea. We just didn't look at the business in that way. And that's not a bad thing, but it does, when you go through a process like this, really start to give you an appreciation for what you've achieved. I think running a business like this, for a lot of us actually, and I'm sure a lot of you feel the same, is you only ever look at what you haven't achieved. You feel, you know, there's still a huge amount that you want to do. And it's a bit like emptying the ocean with a teaspoon. So all you ever do is you look at the ocean in front of you that you haven't yet emptied, rather than looking at the sizable lake that you've created over your shoulder while you were emptying the lake. So I would say, you know, the process of applying for the award, what you learn about your business and what you get out of the satisfaction if you do win is massively worth it. So if you can, I'd really encourage you to go for it. And good luck.
I hope you've heard enough benefits there to convince you that it is a very worthwhile award to win. The credibility of a win has huge value to any business, from an employee, from a customer, and from a actual business valuation point of view. But now let's answer the more practical question. How do we apply for it? And importantly, how do we maximize our chances of winning? So before you put pen to paper, you've got a few decisions to make. The first decision we've discussed already: which categories, plural, should we enter? So do consider entering multiple ones. There's a lot of content that can be swapped between the two if you've been innovative and successful internationally, or you are very sustainable and you are successful internationally. The reason it's quite good to go for multiple categories is there is a bit of cross-fertilization. Every award wants an ethical business. And also, having international trade is asked for in other application forms like the innovation. So the fact that you're good at multiple categories just makes you even more attractive to the organisers in whichever categories you're going for. The next decision, once you've decided your categories, is time frame. Now, each category you have 2 boxes, and you can tick one of them, and that is the time frame of your application. And by time frame, you submit the financials for a certain number of years. So when we're talking about year-on-year growth, and you've only got 2 years, it's just year-on-year, literally. But if you're putting in 6 years, they want to see 5 years of growth against a baseline year. So for innovation, it's 2 or 5 years. International, it's 3 or 6 years. Sustainable development, it's 2 or 5. And social mobility, it's just 2 years that they want to see it's established for. But they want to have a bit of history as well. So it isn't the same from one category to the next. But if you were to put together 6 years worth of financials for all of them, at the start of your process, that would be recommended, just so that you can make a decision. And also, even if it's a 5-year application, you can talk about how that first year was a year of growth as well, if possible. But that's your first decision you need to make. Then, when you've made all those decisions, the first part of the application process that we would recommend you starting on is the financial part. Now, the financial application form is much more black and white. There are a few boxes in there for you to, for example, explain why you might have had a dip in turnover or a dip in profits. You can actually justify that. We have seen people win who have put content in there, but it's not. Ideally, you'll choose a time frame where you don't have any significant dip. And each category asks for different financials. All of them want total turnover and net profit. And then, for example, international trade wants total overseas sales, and then also sustainable development. You're looking at, but they're still interested in your exports as well, and they look for net assets, and each form is fairly demanding. You need to choose one legal entity, and that company registration number is included at the beginning of your application form. So what is the company, what is its company registration number? Which might seem really simple and obvious if you are a small business, but if you're representing a larger organisation and you talk to a finance department, you might find out there's a whole web of legal entities. You have to choose one. It's okay to include the subsidiaries, but if you're entering a subsidiary, you're only allowed to enter the financials for that subsidiary but you have to state the overall parent company, but they're not interested in the parent company's financials. So there's a lot of revenue recognition complications if you're entering on behalf of a large company. And here are some of the separate ones to do. This total net assets is a bizarre one to come under social mobility, but the most complicated one is the innovation, because that is looking at a specific innovation as well as the company as a whole. But international trade comes second to that, because it's looking at your exports as well as the company as a whole. And by exports, the easiest way to look that up, if your finance system doesn't export it, is to look at zero-rated VAT invoices. What they're describing, just on that point, is that when they say exports, it can be through an agent. So you are allowed to say, we exported £1 million, but we invoiced that company in the UK who did the exporting for us. That is eligible. It takes a bit of explanation, but they have put in the guidelines that it can do that. We tend to find it's much cleaner if you are invoicing an overseas entity, and it's the total value of those overseas invoices. And if your overseas invoices are less than about 15% of your turnover, then I'd probably say you're a long shot on this one. They do prefer it to be a company that is primarily an exporter. So ideally over half of your turnover is exports, but I've seen companies successful that are less than that. So I'd put 30% as a threshold for considering it, but that's my experience as opposed to anything formal and in writing. The next part, once you've done your financials, and you might want to sense check it, and if you're early, so Lindsay was rightly saying, don't leave this to the last minute, and if you are early in the game and you fill in your financials, you can get them sense checked. I mean, we'll happily do it for you, but equally, if you're really early, the Queen's Awards organisers will actually sense check your financials. It's not something they publish online, it's something they do as a discretionary basis, but it's worth considering that. And you would show them your financials, and they won't say, yes, you're going to win, or no, you're not going to win. But they can give you some feedback on whether to go for a 2 or 5 year, and they can sometimes spot something that is an absolute deal breaker, such as a major dip in exports. Okay, once you've done your financials, you've got a whole swathe of text boxes to fill in, and these vary from one category to the next. In total, it'll come to about 5,000 words, which compared to most other awards is substantial. The commonest word count in awards out there is about 1,500 words. Some awards, like the International Business Awards run in America, and a lot of other American awards, you're looking at a much smaller word count, like 650 word essay, and then a supporting document. So 5,000 words is a lot, but it's not just a case of, like you might do with a dissertation, just fill in the content and submit it. You'll probably end up writing 10,000 words, 15,000 words, and that's good, because it means you can distill it down and have a very concentrated body of evidence to convince the judges. So if you just fill it in and you're exactly on 5,000 words, I'd probably say you haven't put enough in there. Paraphrasing is a necessary part of a journey. It's quite time consuming. Each text box tends to have a word limit for that text box as well. It's an online form. So do the work in Microsoft Word. We've got copies of all of the application forms that we always use as a starting point. Don't move it into the digital domain until the last minute, until everyone's done their comments, done their track changes, and everyone's happy with it. The passion and conviction is absolutely necessary. Hyperboles used with caution. Don't say things like, the customers loved it, it was a phenomenal success with the customers. You might need evidence to prove that, like a customer survey, or use something like customer thermometer, and you come up with data over time, and if you're business to business, then a one-off customer survey maybe, to prove what you're trying to say there. There's no point in making any kind of unsubstantiated claim, because there's nothing that annoys a judge more than an unsubstantiated claim about happy staff, happy customers, phenomenal growth, and using hyperboles like that. But just because I'm saying don't use phenomenal in your application doesn't necessarily mean don't be passionate. They want passion and conviction. This is for enterprise, this is for entrepreneurs. They want to hear the energy, as you heard with Lindsay there, absolutely passionate about your business. So do include that in, but just get the balance right between conviction and confidence versus hyperboles and what could be seen as PR speak. So marketing speak is bad, evidence is essential. We're going to talk about evidence in a moment, but the first thing you're going to do when you go through it is plan the structure. So the narrative sections, put in your headings, and then don't necessarily start writing, but just go through it heading by heading and work out what you're going to say and what assets, what evidence points you need. And if you can do that as a first pass, you'll come up with what we at Boost call a shopping list. And that is all the evidence points for testimonials, for photos and diagrams you're going to put in as supporting material, and the statistics that you possibly are missing. Think big, think about what you'd like to say, and if you've got enough time, then you've got time to go out there and run a survey or run some market research exercise to prove to the judges that you aren't just good, you are outstanding. Another big part of your application form is called the declaration, formerly known as the Declaration of Corporate Responsibility. Now, for most of these categories, except the social mobility one, there are 4 sections. This isn't about being necessarily an award-winning company. So this isn't an entry form for a Corporate Social Responsibility Award. This part is to prove to the awarding body that you are a responsible business, that they can put the Queen's crown in a logo on your website without any embarrassment to the crown. The point is that it's about covering the 4 bases, and these are the impact of your business operations on society, on the environment, on employees, and that's a section that's not in the social mobility application, and on the marketplace, so customers and suppliers. And that's changed a bit over recent years, and it's become more aligned to business in the community's 4 pillars, which is Prince Charles's organisation. They don't want you to copy the content. So if you're going for the sustainable development category, you're going to have loads of content that could go into both sections. So do cross-referencing here. They've massively reduced the word limits here, so it's 250 words per section. It used to be much bigger. It used to be, when it was done on pages, a whole page, and you could squash like 750 words on each. So it's very tight, so don't do repetition. Don't waste your words repeating. Cross-referencing is absolutely fine. As I mentioned earlier, these judges are paid to judges. They're part of government, so they will happily flip between pages, and don't worry about that. Okay. I'm going to cover off the most important part in the narrative section is evidence. With the financial section, your evidence is obvious. They're asking you to provide very explicit financial information. Here, it's up to you and up to your judgment to make sure the judges believe your claims, believe your assertions. And this is one of the most important things in awards in general, and why we actually have a subsidiary called Boost Evaluation, is because evidence gathering is make or break, and you can out-evidence a competitor, and often awards judges will lean towards the story with the strongest evidence if it's comparable stories. The best thing in any form of evidence is benchmarking, and the reason we say that is because of your burden of proof here. In most of the applications, you have to prove that you are leading your industry. So saying year-on-year performance has improved doesn't demonstrate that. So benchmarking yourself, your financials, your customer satisfaction, your social mobility statistics, your innovations performance against competitors will make it very easy for a judge to say, this isn't just good, this is outstanding. Standard fare, but actually it's amazing how many companies don't have this, is customer and supplier surveys. So supplier surveys are less popular and I'd say less necessary unless you're going for a sustainable development, and it's a big part of the story there. Customer surveys, I would say, are a rite of passage. It's very hard to say you have a great innovation unless you can prove that customers are happy with it. Equally, if you are doing well as a business in terms of international trade, it's great to prove that your international customers are happy with the service that you've provided as a British enterprise. And equally, if you're going for social mobility, and we've seen stories here where you want to show that employees recruited from disadvantaged backgrounds are happy, if not happier, than those who aren't. So there's all sorts of survey data. There's loads of points you can prove with a good survey. And so, and SurveyMonkey is easy to use, and there's plenty of other surveying tools out there. And I would highly recommend sense checking at the earliest opportunity what evidence is missing. And it's likely that if you can't find empirical data, you're going to need one or other or both of them. But there is always a methodology out there which is considered best practice to prove this. And if you've only got 1 or 2 clients, then testimonials will do. You do have 5,000 words, testimonials are acceptable. We see that as qualitative and quantitative, and it's good to get a mixture of both. Payback is another form of evidence. You are asked for your financials. In the innovation in particular, it's great to include a graph. Now, you might be familiar with the hockey stick graph, where you show that your investment puts you at a negative. You start spending money and you go into the red, and then you start clawing back the investment, and you cross the x-axis, which is 0, and the point at which you cross the x-axis is payback. What period of time has elapsed since payback? And you can upload a graph to support that. You're allowed to upload quite a lot of supporting material. We do have an example application here, which you can look at, but please don't take away. And Customer Thermometer's application, Lindsay has allowed you to have a look at that if you want to see what. This is the entire application. It's quite chunky, but it's not terrifying. In terms of supporting material, it's a plain text application, but here are their graphs to prove that they have happy staff and happy customers. Obviously, as a surveying company, you'd expect that. But this is, yeah, they nailed it. And you can have a look at what they've done, as this is certainly best practice because this is what they do. And they can probably help you achieve the same graphs if you wanted to. But yeah, you're allowed to upload images, diagrams, testimonials, case studies as supporting material. And we tend to like them Appendix 14, Appendix 15, and so that you can easily cross-reference them from the main content. Okay, so that leads us nicely onto the supporting material. You're technically allowed 3 files. You can upload them as things like JPEGs, but we would recommend that you create a set of appendices so that you can have one PDF file and you upload it, and the appendices are numbered, maybe the figures, the diagrams are numbered, and make it very easy to cross-reference. Having multiple supporting materials isn't necessarily a good thing. In the international trade, maps are fantastic to show the distribution of trades. Survey results are great. Case studies, photo examples of employees and staffs are brilliant. Press clippings, like you saw there from Lindsay, are also good. This is one of the few awards out there that is actually interested in other awards. The general principle is, and we get asked it a lot, hey, we won this award, shall we mention it when applying for another award? And the general answer is no, it's not a good thing. But with these awards, they are. And because they know they are in a different league, they're actually interested in other awards, particularly ones that relate to the subject, that it is to do with being socially responsible. They're also interested in accreditations, so it could be ISO 9000. We do also recommend diagrams. Although your story might make complete sense to you, diagrams help the judges get how things are interrelated. And so having molecule diagrams and flow diagrams in particular are very helpful to tell the story and make complicated things far easier to absorb. Right, the final asset. So you have a written entry, you have supporting material, you have your declaration of corporate responsibility. There's one more asset, and this is a potential minefield. If you get through to the finals, and you're told in late October or early November that, well done, you've been shortlisted. The good news about the Queen's Award is it's not like another award where being shortlisted gives you about a 10-20% chance of winning. With the Queen's Award, it's the other way around. The vast majority are culled in stage 1, and being shortlisted means you're probably in with a very good shout. But the last hurdle is this, the signed endorsement from your accountants. Now, we have seen it where people didn't engage their accountants at the start of the journey. And the accountants have picked out a problem in the financials that they've been reported wrong. You know, I think one person had a missing 0 in it. It was just a typing mistake. And another said that the FTE figure was wrong. It really looks bad, and it puts your entire application in doubt if your accountants find anything wrong with your application at this stage. If nothing else, a top tip to take out of this room, if you are going to self-nominate, is engage your accountants from the start. Get them to supply your financials. Get them to check your financials. Everything that's factual, that's within their sphere. Sometimes when an accountant gets given this job, they get a little bit enthusiastic and they start cross-checking and double-checking all sorts of things that you really hope they didn't. But the point is they send their feedback direct to the organisers. So if there's anything in there that casts doubt on your application, then you can't go back to them and say, oh, hold on, could you not mention that, please? So you're not meant to interfere with that part of the process. So get them involved before you submit your main application. Forewarn them that at some point before Christmas, I'm going to need you to endorse our application. Here it is. Are you happy with it? Say so now, because I've still got 2 weeks before the deadline. Okay, so that's another thing. As Lindsay was saying, don't leave it to the last minute. Your accountants might not be able to turn that around in a couple of weeks, so give them as much head start. And this could start with you doing what I recommended, which is start with the financial part of the application form, but they will need to read your whole application form as well. So they're an important stakeholder to engage. You also, if you've got a finance director, I would make sure that the finance department are involved as well. But it's not enough for them to sign it off. It has to be an external accountant or auditor. They will often charge for you. The highest quote I've ever heard here is £4,000 just to check your Queen's Award application. That was one of the big four accountants. I know it's horrendous. I think they haggled on that point. But just to forewarn you that it's free to enter. There's no dinner to attend or fees for that. It's at your site. But there are associated costs, and the accountant is probably one of them. So what now? What are your next steps? So I want to sum up what you can do now and what you need to plan to do to make sure that you achieve the highest chance of winning one of these fantastic awards from the Queen. So let's just recap. First of all, get a working party together. Who within your business or outside your business, including your accountants and anyone you're going to get involved in putting the entry together, who is involved, and get them engaged from the start. Start with your financials and review them, maybe run them past the Queen's Award, certainly double check and make decisions on which time frame to go for based on your financials, and also which categories to go for. And do please consider multiple categories, it's absolutely fine. Then when you go through it, the other thing that's going to take a lot of time are the surveys and the evidence gathering, the market research, the benchmarking. The evidence gathering can take months, especially if you're in a large company where there is a lot of governance to do with any kind of research or surveys. So start that as soon as possible. And just on that point, our record is someone contacted us at 10:30 in the morning on the day of the deadline, and they did make the midnight cutoff by a couple of minutes. They didn't win. They won the next year, but it would be ill-advised to leave it to the last minute, because what we experienced is going through their content, and it was literally all hands on deck, is so many gaping holes that if we had just a bit of time, we could have filled these in. So the sooner you get a sight of your shopping list, your gaps list, the more time you've got to survey your customers, survey your staff, benchmark your competitors. And there's some really good techniques there that we could share. There's loads of blogs and there's loads of information on the Queen's Award website, articles about previous winners. It's quite handy. I mean, you've heard Lindsay here today, but if you're going for a different application, to hear the stories and what you're trying to learn from this is what made them win. How can I tell my story in a way that's going to win in a similar way? There's loads of content on the Queen's Award website for that. And if you aren't successful this year, then that's not a problem. The fact that you've entered for 1 year and been unsuccessful and reapplied is considered by the awards as a good thing. And when you apply the following year, you will find the entry form asks you, have you applied before? And it asks you for the reference number. And that's not a bad thing. The fact that you have tried again, you've learned from it, is positive. And as Lindsay says, going through the process highlights all kinds of statistics that you maybe should be gathering as a business, and you will have another chance. So it's not necessarily the end of the road if you apply unsuccessfully this year. And whether or not you're successful, you will get feedback from the organisers. And that in itself is a benefit, because it helps you improve as a business, because what the Queen's Award for Enterprise is after is outstanding businesses. And they're going to help you measure how your business compares to what the Queen regards as outstanding. And all that remains is to say good luck if you're thinking of applying for a Queen's Award for Enterprise. That's a really good question. The outstanding, if you were to look it up in the dictionary, would basically mean that you are far better than a peer group. So it doesn't, but it's different to the word the best. So if the burden of proof was that you are the best in your industry, which is always the best message if you can come up with, but you might actually be number 2 or 3. But what you need to do is prove that you're not in the pack, that you are one of the 1, 2, 3 true pioneers. The message you want to get across is that ideally you are the industry leaders, and that doesn't necessarily mean in terms of financials. What it could mean is that you are the innovators, and it might be that there's a huge company that just copies you. There's loads of examples in history where the innovator, the pioneer, the person pulling the industry forwards is not the main player financially. But if a message in your text is that we are leading from a financial point of view, sustainability point of view, for example. I mean, there's a local Sussex printing company that said 500 other printing companies have followed us with this accreditation, but we were the first, not in terms of Queen's Award, but a certain sustainability accreditation. The fact that they were leading from a sustainability point of view is what the judges want to hear. Or from an export point of view, we were the first in China. We have the highest proportion of turnover, but is from exports. Well, this is a challenge with the Queen's Award for Enterprise Innovation, and we've seen a lot of people fail because the Queen's Award will read the application, and we've seen it too many times. It happened a lot with service sectors, and they're less strict about it now. But they will say to you, but you didn't invent this. So you have found an entirely new medium for marketing. And like there was one company, and they would, without giving too much away, they found a way of getting messages to consumers in a very clever way that no one had discovered before. And it was very inexpensive, and it was very cunning. But it was on paper. And the Queen's Award were like, well, you didn't invent paper marketing. You just found a different way to do it. But then it used to be slightly unfair that like Dyson would come up with a whole new vacuum cleaner and win, but he didn't invent the vacuum cleaner. So you have to prove to the judges that you have taken something, even if it existed before, and it's a quantum shift. So you haven't just done something that everyone else does and just tweak it a little bit. It's much easier if your story is that you could patent it, and you can quote a patent number, because then you can say, we did invent something. But I've seen very few applications with patent numbers. But the Queen's Award for Enterprise Innovation, that is a difficult burden of proof, and why the actual conversion rate from application to win is, from our experience, one of the lower ones. It's much easier with international trade to say, are we eligible or not? Yes, we are, absolutely. And just as long as you don't drop a ball, you could win and have a pretty good chance of it. But it is a very subjective question. Did you invent this? Are you outstanding? And that's why there are narrative sections. Things like the Tech Track and there's other awards like the Top 100 Employers, which is just statistical. And there is no room for manoeuvre. But here, 5,000 words will help you convince the judge that your case is true. And there's another example of that with an exporter, is their export growth was not brilliant. It was pretty average until they benchmarked it against their competitors. And then every year it grew faster than their competitors. And that benchmarking graph changed them from a non-winner to a winner in lots of different awards, not these. So it's to take your claim and evidence it to a very sceptical judge. They do get evidence from other areas as well. This is a government agency-led application process, and they do actually engage things like the Health and Safety Executive and other government agencies to check that there are no black marks against the business. So it's a really, really thorough process. And if you make a claim that out there in the data sphere is evidence against that, then they will pick up on it. So it's a very thorough process. Most judges, we do workshops sometimes where we get people to judge award applications for the first time as part of a process of learning to write. And we time them to see how long it takes them to judge a typical award application. How long do you reckon they spend? 5 minutes. 6-7 minutes on the first attempt, sub 5 minutes on my second attempt. And that is pretty standard. Some awards with huge application forms, like the BITC awards, limited at 20 minutes. But these awards, the judges will spend hours on applications because they're paid to, most awards judges. So it's a very different mindset for the judge. They are very attentive to what you're telling them. but also sceptical, and they need evidence. Having international divisions is a good thing. I mean, Lindsay, you don't have any agents or anything. You're entirely UK based. Yeah. The international category likes setting up local offices. They also like doing trade missions and getting out there into other countries. But now, obviously, the world is very different, and doing it all virtually is a good thing as well. Now, the challenge with entities, particularly in the US, I know that a lot of companies, I mean, we've done it ourselves, setting up in the US, you have to set it up as an entirely freestanding entity because of various trade restrictions. And so, I mean, we've got Booster Awards Inc. in America. It is an entirely separate company, in which case we cannot, if we were to apply, include it. I don't know, but you can make a link and an ownership between a UK entity and an international entity, and in certain countries it's easier than others. But if there is a broken link and they are not officially owners, so this entity is not 100% owned by this entity, then you're not going to be able to include it. So you can include everything down the tree, but not up the tree. So if you have a parent company of a France, a Germany, a New Zealand and a US division, then all of their financials can be accumulated in the UK entity, and that's fine and that's good. But if there's a broken link and that is a privately owned company with 3 directors and it's not wholly owned by the parent, then you can't. The other way to bear it in mind is that if it has the same name but it's a different entity, you treat them as an agent, and you're allowed to say that we export to a local agent that happens to be a similar brand name. And that is absolutely fine, just so long as you can make the judges believe that you are the British, the UK parent, the owner of the whole exporting exercise, and you are genuinely exporting. Oh, good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I have never seen this part of the application form, but you could. We might have to get back on that. There will be ways that you could put in a hyperlink to a video. You are allowed 3...
we did. I think we put some hyperlinks to various videos in our customer case study video.
Okay. So there you go. And if a supporting document is a PDF, then you can embed a working hyperlink into it. Have I scared anyone off? Is anyone thinking, oh, I was going to apply, but I don't want to apply now? Good, okay, well, that's great. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for Tim and Lindsay for helping. Do shout if you need a hand.